Darren Barnett, let's turn our attention to some other things on the agenda, whether the federal ICAC can be legislated before the end of the year. Is there time to do so? The Prime Minister had said during the campaign that was his intention. He reiterated that to me yesterday, but today he makes the point that it does depend in part on others as well. Will they or won't they back it in time to get it legislated before Christmas?
Well, I think there's a bit of a semantic argument about whether legislated means introduced, debated, passed both houses, and it depends on the agreement, what amendments there might be. So, look, I think, broadly speaking, if there's demonstrable movement on a federal ICAC by the end of the year, that should satisfy most pundits and most members of the public, and probably even the crossbench. If the intent is clear, there's some legislation that's been introduced and it's being debated, that in the end it's a 3-year term. I know it was said year one legislated, semantic argument, but if there's demonstrable movement, I think that should be okay. And from what I've heard, that movement is occurring.
Fiona, that's a good point from Darren. If there is that sort of clear move, and if it's February after a Senate committee or March, it is within a few months, would it matter too much?
To be honest with you, Kieran, I think we need a federal ICAC. I want it to be right, though, and the last thing I think that we need from something like this is for it to be rushed because it was an election promise. If it takes Anthony Albanese, I mean, this is probably different to the view of other Liberals, but if it takes him 18 months to get it in and it's done correctly and we don't have witch hunts that we've seen in New South Wales, but it's actually a fair process and it has all the scrutiny that the Parliament needs, that it is good legislation, then I hope it takes its time. I mean, at the same token, though, I mean, he did make an election promise. He did promise by the end of the year. I mean, that was what he had said, and then he said in other places that the legislation would be tabled. I mean, maybe that was, you know, a bit of overzealous eagerness during the campaign. But, you know, you don't want to get these things wrong because, you know, these things ruin people's lives if innocent people are, you know, wrongly convicted or wrongly brought before witch trials. So, I mean, for the sake of good legislation, I hope it takes the time it needs to. I hope it goes through the full committee process, has the scrutiny required, and has any, you know, potential amendments that would be needed to go through by that parliamentary process.
Once it is passed, Darren, it'll be interesting to see how the Teals readjust, because that would have been the climate bill done, ICAC done, or the Federal Corruption Commission done, and they were the two key pillars. How do they then make themselves relevant?
Well, I think the other third pillar they had was women in Parliament, so they all probably want to be re-elected, Kieran. Look, I think the Teals have positioned themselves well in their relevant debates. In the end, frankly, they're occupying coalition seats, so Labor will be quite happy to help them deliver what they pledged to deliver. I guess then there's another 2 years for the Teals to try and make their own stamp on their own electorates. They need to decide whether they will collaborate with other independents, whether they all sort of go it alone, will they pull staffing and resources, how will they use the committee process, the parliamentary library and other things, and their resources are lessened compared to previous parliaments. So significantly interesting times ahead for the Teals, but you're right, their first two big ticket items may well be past the Parliament by the end of the year.
Darren, Fiona, great to see you both. See you soon.